Welcome to Self Wellness. What a wonderful day to be making America healthy again. But that starts with you, folks, because we can't make America healthy again if you don't make yourself healthy first. And it starts with Jesus. I also believe it starts with fasting. Our first guest that we're going to be bringing on is a gentleman by the name of Greg Phillips. He's also a member of True the Vote. Before we bring him in, I also want to mention that in the second segment, we're going to be bringing in Robert Scott Bell, RSB, good friend of the show, and he's a holistic and, more importantly, naturopathic-minded, I'll call him a doctor. Yeah, let's call him a doctor. He is a holistic-minded podcast host and one of the greatest men you will ever meet on this earth. But before we get into Robert Scott Bell, we're going to be bringing in very shortly Greg Phillips to talk about his healing journey. We've been hearing a lot about potential anti-cancer effects with repurposed drugs, specifically ivermectin, Fenbendazole, Fenbendazole. And the mechanism of action in some of these repurposed drugs are actually incredible because it can inhibit cell proliferation. It induces apoptosis, which is programmed cell death, and it can trigger mechanisms that lead to the cancer death cells. Disrupting mitochondrial function, modulating the PG, these are absolutely incredible things for people with lung cancer, ovarian cancer, leukemia, glioblastomas, breast cancer. I think the more and more that we dig into why these repurposed drugs are working, we start to understand why they were calling them horse dewormers from the very beginning. Without any further ado, Greg Phillips, welcome to the show.
Mike, thanks so much for having me.
You know, I believe that it all starts with believing that you can be healed, right? You know,
Amen.
I know there's so much power in faith, you know, and I always share that, you know, when Jesus was walking with his disciples and the woman who had the problem with the blood, and she reached out to touch his cloak, and he said to her, he said, "Woman, by your faith you are healed. Now go home." Like that, just thinking that if you could just get close enough to Jesus, that you could reach out and touch him. So your journey was combining some pretty unique modalities. Can we talk a little bit about your diagnosis, how you're doing today, and a little bit about your protocol?
Yeah, absolutely. And again, thanks so much for having me. I mean, this story is, as I look back at it now across these 6 years, has been a little bit of an odyssey. But as you correctly point out, I mean, in the end, without Jesus, it's it's a little futile. I mean, surely you could get healed by, a lot of man-made type things that may or may not be, consistent with, sort of my beliefs. But so for me, it started as I had an aggressive, let's see, what is today? So 6 years ago, Wednesday. I was diagnosed with an aggressive prostate cancer. They had done, all the scans, the biopsies, everything else, and called me on July the 2nd, and said, "Hey, this was in 2019, that, hey, you have a very aggressive form of prostate cancer, and we need to get after this pretty quickly." I spent the next few weeks really trying to sort through what that pretty quickly thing really means. Being treated at a variety of hospitals at the Houston Medical Center, and really just went through kind of trying to understand really what all the options really were. I explored pretty much everything you could think of and imagine, from freezing it to burning it to removing the prostate to they have some chemo options and some hormone options and radiation and surgery, and it was honestly a little overwhelming. Um, on or near that day, or one of those days, I was talking to one of the nurses, and I just told her, "Look, I can't make decisions, without time to pray on this and to think about it." And she suggested to me at that point that I do just exactly that, and she and I shared a couple different ideas for apps that we could use, and for 6 years since then, every single day I've been in this one particular app, reading and studying and praying and really trying to have a more clear understanding of what Jesus and the Father expected of me. What I decided to do was a little unconventional. I decided I needed to really talk to God a little bit more than I really had been. I mean, like a lot of Americans or a lot of people across the world, we're really good about asking for things. Christians are, but we don't always sit and listen and be still and listen to His word. And if you are still, then He will speak with you and He will listen. And so I went over to Spain and walked 500 miles on the Camino de Santiago and had some incredible encounters with the Lord and really not just understood really how to listen, but really understood what He was saying. I came back and decided to go through I was sick as a dog when I got back, but uh, really went through kind of an unconventional process. I knew that there were certain things I wanted to do, certain things I didn't want to do. But because I had been delayed, the cancer had progressed a little bit, and so now I was 6 months or so into this, and really got started in earnest with tried a few of the drug therapies and things like that, just as COVID was starting, and then did traditional radiation, and even did a surgery near the end of that. So as by May or so of 2020, when everybody else was sort of worrying about COVID and the whole world was shutting down, I was still going back and forth to the hospital every day, getting radiation and ultimately the surgery. And unfortunately, it didn't really do the trick. It did diminish the depth of the diagnosis. In other words, it wasn't quite as bad as it had been, but it didn't really go. I have a doctor friend who was not my treating physician who had been reading about the Tippins protocol and all of that, and she just said, "Hey, I can't." I can't, you know, give you a prescription for all of this, or you don't even need one, but hey, take a look at this. And so I went in and started looking at it and a lot of the other writing that was out there about it and really tried to follow my own sort of personal naturopathy path. And so I kind of made up my own protocol that was sort of a combination of Fenbin and ivermectin and intermittent fasting. I was doing some high dose vitamin C. And what else was I doing at that time? Kind of went on more of a keto diet, pretty much cut sugar out. But at the core of all of it was prayer. And so every morning, I'm an early riser. So every morning around 5, I'd wake up and spend an hour or so, not just reading, but really praying and then listening to the Lord as I was still sort of going through this. Um, about by now it's into 2021. Of course, we had all the stuff going on with the 2020 elections, and we were involved in some, pretty significant things as it related to those elections, some of which ultimately put us in jail. But all of this was happening all at the same time. So by mid or so 2021, I guess midsummer of 2021, I finally got the word from the doctors that there was no evidence of disease. So, I felt pretty comfortable and confident about it. And a large part due to that ivermectin and the Fenbin and I guess partly because the my body had been maybe prepared or something by the other stuff. I really don't even know. But it didn't matter to me, and I let it go. December or so, Christmas of 2022, about a year and a half later, my youngest son got married. And the day after he got married, the Lord woke me up in the middle of the night and said, "Hey, your cancer's back, but don't worry about it. I got this." And that was it. And I'm like, Okay, that's bad that the cancer's back, but God's got this." And I'm a listening saved believer. And so, what am I going to do beyond that? On or about April of 2023, I actually went to some of the same doctors that I had been going to, had a bunch of scans done, a bone scan and all this stuff. The reason was I was having some extraordinary pain. It was very difficult to get up, very difficult to get out of the bed. We had already been to jail and I had a bunch of sort of blowback from all of that. And I think probably even picked up some parasites and some other stuff while we were in jail. And when I went back to the doctor and they read the diagnosis to me, this was I think May of 2023. They said, okay, you have 12 to 24, I'm sorry, 12 to 18 months to live, and because it had metastasized into my bones, so I had metastatic bone cancer, and the pain was at times off the edge in in that coming period of time. My partner, Catherine Engelbrecht, who's not just my business partner, but I sort of jokingly call her my chief scientist as well, really kind of dug in and we started really looking at some of the science behind what we had already done and what I needed to do going forward. There's lots of different protocols out there and lots of different people that are suggesting do this, do that. Dr. Makis up in Canada has had his own protocol that came out, and we started looking at the Beat Cancer Foundation stuff, and we have a naturopath friend, Tracy Stroop, that was really helpful in helping guide me. And Catherine herself went out and started looking at things like the Rife machine and just all sorts of different things. And really, what we built was really our own protocol. We sort of it had on it at its base what Makis was talking about. And I sent you guys the protocol that I did, at least as far as he was concerned, and then or at least the dosage of it. And and then about January of this year or so, we decided to just go all in with what we had sort of concocted as our protocol that was going to kill this thing once and for all. The dosages and really the combination of everything, I would say to you and your listeners, was kind of the big trick. Listen to the Lord, but do your own research. Don't, there's a lot of well-meaning people out there. They're going to tell you to take apricot seeds and do this and do that and all this different stuff. But and I'm not in any way saying that those people weren't you know certainly trying to be helpful, but we had really dug in and really figured out that fenbendazole and menbendazole and ivermectin. We went back to kind of a heavy keto thing, cut out all sugar. We're still doing the high dose vitamin C, which I think really helped. We were
How
doing
much
the Rife
vitamin C?
machine.
How much vitamin C were you doing a day? And yeah, that up
Yeah,
right there. No, no,
yeah,
Drake, go ahead and pull that back up. The dosage for ivermectin. I'm going to have him dive into that. But how much vitamin C were you taking a day?
man, it wasn't a daily thing. It was a couple times a week, and I can't remember what the final number was. They'll the wherever you go to get it done, they'll have to get it approved by their doctors, and they'll do some different tests and things and take a look at your blood. And I don't even remember the actual number, but it was something, whatever the uh, sort of standard dosages for high dose vitamin C. That's what I was getting twice a week in an IV.
Okay,
And
so
there
but
was
you
some
don't know,
challenge.
maybe 30, 40,000 milligrams.
Oh no, I think it was closer to 90.
Okay, nice. So you were getting 9 grams of vitamin C,
90.
90 grams.
Mm.
Nice.
I'll tell you. Yeah, I'll try to come up with some better answers on that. Sorry, I wasn't quite prepared for the detail on that. But
Okay,
our
and yeah, and then dive into the ivermectin. So how many
yeah,
milligrams per day were you taking of the ivermectin?
it was a dosage. If you take a look at the study that Makis and those guys have pushed out, I think it's even on their website. It's the high risk, high dose one at the very bottom. I think it was 2.5 per kilogram or something like that. And so for me, at my weight, it tallied up to about 180 mgs per day. which is a toxic dose. I urge every one of your listeners, do not try this without the talking to a doctor first, understanding that there are significant side effects with all of it. Um, and I mean, it changed me, it changed my brain, it changed how I communicated with people. I became very almost angry in a way. And I didn't know. I mean, I didn't really understand it all, but I was sort of being, the pain was really off the edge, and that dosage of ivermectin is toxic. It's off the edge. It's very, very high. And I've talked to doctors since then. My friend Stuart Tankersley down in Montgomery, Alabama, Jordan Vaughn, another guy, another one of his partners, in some work that they're doing, and they both agree, man, that's a lot. But I made it through the 12 weeks, and even though the last few days were really difficult, or the last few weeks were really difficult, I had a really interesting encounter with God that I'll come back to, at a Lowe's in Indianapolis, Indiana. I was up there doing some work and had a pretty negative incident, and and it changed my life. It changed my world. I mean, I think that I was brought right up on the edge of death, uh, and and God released me back to this, my life in this dirt world for some reasons, and it changed my life. But a week or so later, I ended the protocol, or it ended, and today I'm in pretty good position. I'm not quite ready to say I'm cancer free yet, or no evidence of disease, because I still need to get a few things done. But I've had some great blood tests. I've had some great scans. There's a lot of good things out there. There's a few residual problems that I'm dealing with. I have every reason to believe. Well, heck, I mean, they gave me 12 months to live, and it's been 2 years. So I feel like every day is a blessing to me, and the Lord allowing me to stay here is something else. But I was doing the ivermectin.
Absolutely. And real quick, Greg, let me ask you this: when you were taking the Fenben, were you doing Fenben or Minben or both?
I wasn't, I ended up not doing the min bin, and I'll come back to that in a moment, but I was doing the ivermectin and the fin bin. So I was doing
Okay.
1,000 milligrams of fin bin 3 times a week, and doing 180 milligrams of ivermectin every day
180
as well.
milligrams. So that's of the, if you were doing the 12 milligram tablets, you were taking like 15, you were taking like 15,
Correct.
16 tabs a day of the
Exactly
ivermectin.
15.
And
Yep.
were you drinking that just straight with water, or were you eating it with meals? I only ask you that because I was on a, when I started diving deep into this about a year ago, I was I was on a Finben forum, and there was a guy that was like basically saying that you should get ice pressed organic olive oil and crush the ivermectin and minben up because it's fat soluble and it drives it into the cell further. So I didn't know if you had tried taking your your Finben and your ivermectin with a healthy fat, or were you chugging it with olive oil? Were you just drinking it with water?
Yeah, some of each. We too saw some of those things, and part of the issue was that I wanted to keep working through this all. I've never stopped working, and sometimes to my own detriment, but I just couldn't. I couldn't resolve in my mind to just lay back in the bed back here and just die, right? Or try not to die, or pray to the Lord to save me. I was called to continue to work and continue to do some of the things that we've been sort of aggressively approaching. And so I didn't always have the ability to stop and crush it all up, and like you said, chug a little bit of olive oil with it, and drink it. There were lots of different ways that I tried it. I'd say probably realistically, uh, half of the time, because I was on the road or doing whatever, I would just pop the pills, just all of them. I'd take a handful. It was a whole fistful of stuff, and it was, we zinc and all sorts of other things that we had in there, but it was like a big handful of pills. And I would just crush them, and go on about my day. Um, the other half of the time was a combination of actually taking the time to crush them and mix them and then take them. And the other time would be the combination where I would just take the pills and drink a little bit of olive oil and let that be it.
Nice. Well,
But
we're only gonna have a couple minutes. So what I think is really important is we would love to see if we could go back to that Lowe's section where you said it drastically kind of changed your life. Maybe we could talk about that until our next guest gets here, and I'll give you a heads up when we got a 60-second countdown.
yeah, sure. So on or about, I was doing everything, right? I was praying every day. I was taking all my meds every day. I was Man, it was a hard time. The pain was like next level stuff. I mean, I'm not really a guy that really spends a lot of time worried about things that hurt or whatever. But the pain in my hips and my back, and even in my neck and down my backbone, was off the edge. It was really, really, really difficult. As I said, all of this had affected me in a very meaningful way. I was in Lowe's. We were doing some work up in Indianapolis, and I needed some Cat 6 cable for two of my teams. So I went over to Lowe's, picked up these two pieces or two boxes of Cat 6 cable, and started to walk out. And I'm not 100% sure what happened. What my friends and some of my intercessors that I work with, they believe that I died briefly. I don't know about that. We'll never know. But what happened was I sort of fell, but it was like, imagine falling in slow motion, and people were around me, right? I mean, it was Lowe's in the morning, so it was fairly crowded with workers and people like me buying things for their jobs, and I literally sort of a slow motion fell like straight down, with these still two of these boxes in my hand, and it was one of those experiences where you can sort of see yourself, and looking back at me, I'm like, what is going on? And I'm looking around, and people are kind of coming up to it, and immediately I was back in my brain, back in my body, and I stood up, and they were trying to call an ambulance, and I'm like, no, 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 I'm perfectly fine. I'm not sure what happened, but I'm fine. And of course, they're encouraging, please go to the doctor. I think the Lowe's people were worried about, somebody falling in their store and maybe a lawsuit or something. Please go to the ambulance, please go to the doctor. And I'm like, no, 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 I'm good. And decided to go to a doctor, or excuse me, go to one of these small ERs, not an urgent care, but a small ER, and went in, and they said, well, we really can't help you. You're going to need to go to your own doctor, whatever, are you okay now? And they kind of looked at me and kind of blew it off. Then I disappeared for 2 hours. No one really knows where I was. There's video of me leaving this ER and getting in my car and going somewhere, but I didn't get back to the job site where my team was working, for 2 hours. And I don't know where I was. There's no activity on my phone. There's no nothing. But when I finally came back, I was standing there at the job site, and my partner Catherine had. Everybody's wondering what happened to me, and somebody came out and handed me their phone, and it was Catherine. She's like, "Where have you been? We thought you were dead. What's going on?" And I said, "I really don't know. I have no idea." But have a clarity about things. We all have a lot of questions in our lives about, our jobs or our families or, whatever else is going on out there, and, lawsuits and things like that. And Catherine was actually, the reason she was trying to get hold of me is because we were in mediation on one of the big lawsuits that we were in, and she needed to talk to me. And, but Mike, I had a sense of clarity that has stayed with me since then. I was in Indianapolis. All this stuff had gone on. The protocol had taken some of my eyesight away. I couldn't really see. My eyesight would narrow like this. It would never completely close, but my eyesight would narrow, and then I would have these little sparkles in there. So I really didn't need to be driving at all. I left Indianapolis later that day after that job closed out, and I was just going to try to maybe drive down to Louisville. I was in my car, maybe drive down to Louisville, get a hotel, whatever, and then maybe make my way back to Alabama eventually. Um, Catherine and I got on a call at 6:15 that night, and she talked to me, and we prayed and we worshiped, and
All right. Not sure what happened there with Greg. There
and
you
we
are.
we we prayed and we worshiped for 7 hours on the phone. And I shared with her the clarity that had been offered to me by God, and it changed everything. It changed everything in our businesses. It changed everything in my relationships with my friends and my family and people that I love and care about. And it was the most extraordinary experience. I have a friend down in Mobile that's a business partner. He's an investor in some of our companies, but he's also my best friend. He's a very successful individual, and but he is the most spirit-led person that I know in all of the world. And one of the things that came out of that drive home was go down there and see him. So I came back to Alabama. I slept for the rest of the night. I got up early in the morning and I drove down to Mobile and I told him what happened. And he immediately, the Lord came on him and he said, "Here's what happened to you. You were in fact a step into the spiritual world, and then for whatever reason, God wasn't ready and you stepped back out. So I was sort of a step in and a step out according to him. And he said, why did you come?" And I said, "Because God said go I can't say his name, but go see this person." And um and he said, "Well, here's what I'm being called to do. I'm going to walk through this thing with you, every single thing you need." He prayed over me. We have other friends that are healers, and they've prayed over me over and over and over again. And today, I can tell you, as I said to be at the outset, that all of that, all of the Fenbin, all of the ivermectin, all of the protocol, all of the high dose vitamin C, the incident in Lowe's, the drive home on the with Catherine, worshiping and praying and reading through the Bible and trying to make sense of it all, and the clarity that surrounds it. All of my friends, all of the people on True Social and everywhere else that pray for me have led me to a place where I can tell you today that my brain scan was clean. My blood work is completely clean. There's a couple little minor issues that they're considering and working on. And what do I do? I'm now taking ivermectin, sort of a maintenance dose of ivermectin again, not 180 milligrams a day,
Awesome.
but closer to 12 milligrams a day. But I do that just on a prophylactic basis, and it's changed my life. 100% changed my life. I
Well,
could not have
Greg, we're going
done
to
this
continue.
interview with you 2 months ago.
Oh, yeah. Listen, Greg, we're going to continue to pray for you. And we want to have you back on the show in another 2 months. Maybe we can do a final follow up and see what those last couple little things are. But the power of prayer is very, very real. I've got to
Amen.
we got to run to a quick little commercial break, and then we're going to be bringing in our next guest. But I want to thank you so much for your love for this country, and thank you for your belief in Jesus that healing could happen. He promised us multiple times, in the book of Isaiah, also in Psalm and in Exodus. He's the same God that he was 2,000, 4,000, and 6,000 years ago. But we're going to run to a quick commercial break, guys, and let's everybody send out some love and some prayers for Greg to continue on his healing journey. Hey guys, Maha Mike here. I've got some exciting news for you. Our new partners at Farm Easy Bank are leading the way in affordable, trustworthy healthcare, bringing an impressive lineup of generic medications at prices that your family can actually afford. Not only that, but they are now offering ivermectin and fenbendazole, two compounds that are gaining attention, and unless you've been sleeping under a rock, you've probably heard about their incredible benefits. You can trust every single order that you get from Farm Easy Bank. Why? Because they come from reputable, reliable sources, and their commitment to quality means you get the same effectiveness you'd expect from the big box store without the outrageous price tags. In fact, you can save up to 80%. That's right, 80% compared to traditional pharmacy prices. On top of that, they offer fast, discreet shipping to the comfort of your home. And the best part is, you can use the coupon code MAHA2025 for 20% off any order over $199. This is a limited time offer, so don't wait. Take control of you and your family's health today and stock up because you would rather have it and not need it than need it and not have it. So go to Farm Easy Bank. That's PharmEasyBank.com/Maha and start your wellness journey with trusted support and serious savings. I hope you guys give them a try. And if you heard our previous guest, Greg's testimony, I think he was taking a couple things that saved his life. Well, we're going to be bringing in Robert Scott Bell, a naturopath and a very good friend of the show, a good friend of the Maha movement, and probably one of the realest guys you've ever met who lives by everything that he preaches. Robert Scott Bell, welcome to the show.
Hey, good morning, Mike. How are you? Good to see you, my brother.
Man, fantastic, dude. It's so incredible that we're now finding out. And again, you know, a lot of these people might not have had to rely on repurposed drugs if they had lived a lifestyle, you know, of eating clean food and staying away from processed food and ultra processed sugars and done the exercising and praying in the first place. But it's incredible how resilient the human body is. And I know you've seen a lot of people on death's door or near death make some crucial changes. You know, one of your dear friends, Dr. Edward Group, says that sometimes cancer is actually just a wake-up call. Sometimes it's just it's trying to save you. It's saying, hey, what you've been doing in your life, it's not what your body was meant for. It's time to start making some drastic changes. But that's not what we're here to talk about. I just wanted to carry it on over. We're going to talk a little bit about the ACIP committee votes and what you think is happening here in the world of vaccines and the board that's going to be overseeing them.
Yeah, well, what's missing is the fact that they don't invite anybody who has a vital force view of the body, life, health, and healing. We talk about vitalism in homeopathy, in naturopathy, in herbalism, in acupuncture, in Ayurveda, all of these, what we call energy first perspectives on life, that energy precedes matter. And all that they do when they invite allopathic physicians and PhDs is work with molecular reductionism, isolationism, and a wrongful worship of the Holy Grail within junk immunology, which is called the antibody. It's all about the antibody. And they will sacrifice children on this altar with these vaccines by convincing parents or mandating it so the parents don't even have a chance to think about it, that they will not survive childhood unless they get these chemical genetic cocktail injections into their children to elicit the antibody response, which is not even possible in a child's immature immune system, certainly within the first 2 years of life. Some have argued even beyond that. So the idea that they would inject these things to say, we are going to create the antibody, and then if we can, let's say, test the blood for a titer, of that antibody, that we succeed, even though they don't do that normally. But that's their litmus, if you will, not whether the kid is sick or not, or has a chronic disease or not induced by these vaccines. So we have a faulty system that relies upon a wrongful paradigm, a paradigm that has diminished the natural God-given immunity, innate and adaptive, and also maternal immunity that comes from the mother through breast milk, breastfeeding, colostrum, etc., and jumps right over it and says the only thing that you're allowed or can do to prevent disease, infection, etc., are these artificial infections by injections. And Dr. Henry Ely, my buddy, you know him well. We talked about this on my Sunday. That was a bonus on the Friday, and we did a Substack on it, so you guys can see and read that. I don't know if you have that linked up, but I think it's important because very few people are talking about it from that perspective. Whereas I can acknowledge that they voted not to recommend multi-dose container flu shots, which contain additional thimerosal, aka mercury preservative, to allow it to be used multiple times. The reality is, okay, I'll applaud it. Great job. But how many decades or centuries behind are allopaths to think that mercury is safe to ingest, much less inject into the body? There it is. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's insane Hahnemann, who founded homeopathic medicine in the late 18th, early 19th century, 200 years ago, recognized the danger of mercury at minute doses just from external exposures, much less the injections that would later come in allopathic medicine. So as much as I'd like to say, hey, it's a good thing, I'll acknowledge that. But then they add this other injection for RSV, right? Respiratory syncytial virus, whether you believe in it or not. The fact is we can address respiratory issues in infancy with homeopathy and other natural substances, but there's no acknowledgement of that because it's as if the entire history of natural medicine on the planet doesn't exist because they have a dangerous death cult known as allopathic, pharmaceutical, pseudoscientific injected medicines or interventions. So I know that's a loaded thing to respond at this point in time, Mike, but I think we must go there to recognize we've abandoned a significant portion of human natural healing history to have this ACIP committee go, well, we're kinder and gentler, and we're going to vote out one thing while we're going to continue to keep everything else going.
I think we've got to give them enough rope, per se, and you know why we got to give them enough rope. But I think that a lot of our listeners, are not really. I don't want to say that they're not open to the idea, but there is definitely, and if you sit down and you talk with Dr. Ely for more than 30 minutes, and if you go to the Healing for the Ages conference, you really start to understand. And correct me if I'm wrong, but when you're talking about energy first perspective and health, right? You're really talking about how in the world that you and I live in, health is seen as a free and balanced flow of energy through the body, right? Which is why acupuncture and chiropractic can really go hand in hand, and really, so our listeners understand that disease or dysfunction is really a blockage or an imbalance or a deficiency in the energy. And when you start to restore this energy flow, and I know that Dr. Ely, has a bunch of different ones that they, could recommend or even look at. But when you go overseas and you look at like traditional Chinese medicine, right, and you look at the qi, or you look at how do you pronounce it, the Ayurvedic medicine, one that comes from
Ayurvedic.
India, where they talk about your life force being prana, right? We've now started to look at biofields, right? So you've got modern integrative medicine for the body's energy field. And for me as a Christian, I've always seen it as life force or spirit, right? The spiritual or faith-based healing context. And a lot of it too is, and correct me if I'm wrong. If I believe that it's not going to work, it's not going to work. But if I believe fully that my body has the ability to heal itself, that's when the journey starts to begin, right? Being open to understanding that you can actually, I've been following a lot of people on a Substack that talk about talking to your cells. And it's like, that sounds crazy, but knowing that our body is compromised of 70% or more of water, and you start looking at, the guy from Japan, I know you're familiar with Emoto's work. Right. So when you start thinking about that, we absolutely can talk to ourselves.
Well, and we must. I mean, the thing is, we have warning signs that are called symptoms that are not here to annoy you and tick you off, but they're really here to guide you to say, hey, something's off. What are you doing? Check it out, right? And, we can always use the automobile analogy because people understand it pretty easily, that if your warning light comes on in your car, do you remove the bulb or shoot the light out, or do you pay attention and say, hey, something's going on, let's check it out, let's get an analysis done? Now, of course, we'll often take it to a mechanic if you're not well versed in mechanics. Now, of course, the computers that are running these cars are ridiculous. But the idea here is to pay attention when they're subtle and easy, as opposed to when the big C comes along. We call that cancer, as you talked about. And as Ed Group has described, and I've said it too, it can be a gift. And many people who have had cancer and overcome it acknowledge that it was a life-changing, transformative, positive experience, ultimately, even though it wasn't easy. I would argue that there were a zillion signs long before that manifested that the doctors are not adept to pick up on, because they'll only find things when it's a disaster or that level. And they don't, as well, guide you, as a doctor should be a true teacher, to say, hey, what are you putting in your body? What are you doing in your life and lifestyle that would contribute ultimately to this cancer diagnosis, for instance. And so I've said this, and you've heard me many times over the years speaking about the real healer reminds you and tries to reconnect you to the source of all healing, and that is your divinity. And that's an energetic reality. And yes, it starts with belief, but then it becomes a knowingness as you experience that manifesting. And so you could look at cancer as something like a curse or a punishment, or you could say, hey, these cells are just doing what they're doing because I've given them the body to do that. What do I got to do? Do I go to battle and war with those cells, which used to be part of your own body's, normal cellular makeup? Or do I bring the love back in where often cancer exists, where love doesn't, where fear is? And bringing that love back in is a different perspective than always going into battle. We have such warfare terminology when we talk about beating a disease, destroying a disease, killing a disease. Well, cancer is not trying to kill you. It's just the life that is given when you ignore all of the myriad of symptoms that the doctors say don't mean anything, or, hey, they mean something, but here's a drug to suppress it. In the meantime, you're poisoning your body, not back to health, but to deeper states of chronicity, starting with the vaccine schedule, the alteration of the body's energy field. And let's talk about the chemical presences of things that, if you encountered from a air, food, and water perspective, might not be ideal, but you have some mechanism with which to sequester and bind and excrete. When you inject, you bypass a million layers of the immune system. It's an abnormal interaction with the outside world, and that's where allopathic medicine is so sick and inducing of sickness and illness, completely devoid of the knowledge of what we're talking about, the energetic reality of the ki, the chi, the spirit that gives the body life. And when we leave this body, it's a bunch of chemicals that begin to decay without that life force or vital force. Again, the chiropractors call it innate intelligence. These are the things that are ignored by the Western reductionist, collectivist, Marxist, medical madness mindset.
Yeah. And one of the things too, and I love that you brought up the analogy, Robert, was when you talked about the electric and even the gas-powered cars that are like now have this new computer system. I've been reading in my spare time Healing is Voltage by Jerry Tennant, and also I've been reading The Body Electric. And, the more and more that we start to understand that, when you switch to the concept of the body as being a battery, and you think about the holistic health and bioenergetics and even cellular biology, you start thinking about your body like when you break it down in the concept of a car. Like, what does a car need? It needs water, it needs gas, it needs an electrical system. But when you start seeing that your bioelectrical system not only generates energy, but it also stores energy, and then it can distribute the energy, and it also requires energy to function optimally. And I think, you were one of the first people that really got me on the kick of understanding ATP and the actual, the mitochondria, which is what, I guess you would call it the chemical energy currency of your body. And ATP is actually charging your battery. And if you can hold an electrical charge in your cells, there's an electrical membrane potential. And when you start thinking positively and you've got a good flow of ions, which is why it's crazy where I every time I feel like they have an assault on salt, if you're taking in good salt, good quality salt that's free and void of metals, I think you start to restore your sodium, potassium, and calcium levels, and these membranes start to become like a powerhouse. And just like the body has water and electrons, and again, I know you and I might disagree versus every other doctor, whether it's 30, 40, 60, or 70% water that we have in our body. Water does conduct electricity. So how important is it for us to be drinking clean water? I don't know whether you structure your water. I've got the one, and I think you've got the one too, from Dr. Paul Baratero. We carry his water purifiers. Yeah, we carry the Echo waters because that hydrogen gas that's dissolved in the water, it has been a game changer for a lot of people who have cancer or people who are trying to fight. And it gives your body an unbelievable amount of energy And I like to think that, the hydrogen water is just, it's the oxidative reduction inside of the body, and,
Yeah.
helps reduce inflammation. Can you dive a little bit more into the conversation that you had with Dr. Ely, and kind of give us your perspective on, combining energetic healing into the world that we live in now?
Yeah, and recognizing the interface between the physical world and the energetic world. So we talk about, electrical realities. And yes, it flows through certain things, and you have to have conductivity. And of course, the minerals are key. And when you talk about ATP, I've discussed the key minerals. And I'm not saying they're the only ones, but mostly the key deficiencies that corrupt energy production at that deep mitochondrial level, being magnesium and copper. Magnesium, nobody's really afraid of magnesium relative to, even when you talk to doctors about it, they don't, oh, yeah, so you can take magnesium, no problem. But when you talk about copper, their immediate response is, whoa, 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 that can be toxic. Like, well, true, anything could be taken to excess and create some level of danger or dysfunction. But in reality, we are so deficient in copper that the correction here in terms of the minerals coming in is that proverbial game changer. Once you supply the body and the minerals in the right form in its bioactive and bioavailable state, then suddenly things come back online, like energy production. And I've used the copper 1, copper 2 balanced state within water, pure water, like the Sovereign Copper or Sovereign Copper Pro, that really kicks things into gear in a hurry. And of course, copper manages the inflammatory cascades that are often part and parcel to chronic degenerative diseases. So the energy, the appropriate use of energy, and the energy is redirected in a chronic body, a chronically ill body that's intoxicated. Heavy metals in particular can corrupt the flow of energy, like mercury. Now aluminum, we know aluminum conducts, but of course it corrupts as well. It can damage the myelin sheath of the nerve cell, the insulating factor for proper conductivity, whereas silver as a trace element, like in the Sovereign Silver and Argent 23, facilitates proper nerve function and regenerative processes. As you mentioned, The Body Electric by Dr. Robert Becker, that's where I first encountered that concept of not all metals are bad, and it's all about context, quantity, bioavailability, bioactivity, all of that. So regenerating tissue means we've got to get out of the chronic states of inflammation that corrupt the energy flow, that redirect energy toward just protection, like Bruce Lipton talks about. You're in fight or flight all of the time because the people with cancer didn't know, they weren't advised by the doctors that they thought were really smart to eat cleaner foods that were devoid of what? Not vitamins, minerals, and trace minerals, but devoid of additives and preservatives and colorings and flavorings and pesticides and herbicides and fungicides and GMOs and heavy metals and plasticizers and on that disrupt the flow. And now your body has to go on defense. You put food with those things in it. Your body says, how do we deal with that? How do we find anything good in there? So you're not engaging in, let's accept this wonderful, nourishing thing called food. Now you're going, there's some garbage here. There's some toxic poisons. How do we stop that? Yet we got to find something to survive on here. So your body's in a state of flux between trying to regenerate and heal and protect itself from the onslaught of toxic chemicals. The worst being injected. We come back to the vaccines, but even in the standpoint of eating regular food, whether you're going to your local fast food restaurant with chicken nuggets that are from factory farm chickens, or loaded with things you can hardly pronounce, and on top of that, excitotoxins, derivations of MSG, monosodium glutamate, that are often in like various fast food chicken sandwiches that people are just like, they're addicted to it. It's like this craving that happens, and you see these mile-long lines just getting ready for that. So we're doing no great service to our bodies when we feed ourselves things that are less than optimal. And I would say that is kind of an insult to that which created us all, that we would treat our temples in such a way. Now, I recognize for most of us in America, including myself, for the first 24 years of my life, I didn't know that I was doing that. Everybody was doing it. You were eating whatever you were, could get as fast and cheap as possible. How much do you love yourself? One of the evidence to, finding the answer to that question is, what are you putting in your body? I'll use the car analogy again. If there's a gas station with a reputation for having dirty gas, and you find that out, do you immediately go there because it's cheaper? Or do you say, I'm going to find the gas that's clean, my car can run and I won't stall out? And of course, I'm not going to put dirty gas in my car. What do we do when we eat less than optimal, clean, organic quality, whether it's certified or not, food? How much do we love ourselves? Some people have been wrongly convinced that eating organic is like an elitist thing. Oh, you must be one of those, health nut things. And it's also kind of strange that people who want to eat healthier foods are derided with an ad hominem or just a nasty, oh, you're a health nut. Like, that's like, really? People that smoke excess cigarettes from chemical factory farm tobacco, or drink alcohol to excess to abuse their liver, they're not called cigarette nuts and health and alcohol nuts. This was something that came from Dick Gregory, the famous comedian, who going through the civil rights era. What an amazing man. I got to interview him a couple of times over the years. But that concept of how our common vernacular denigrates people who want to do better for their bodies. Oh, that's a nutty thing to do. You're made fun of. You don't want to eat the fast food restaurants or the chemically grown and genetically modified things, or even now the seed oils. Oh, you're one of those that doesn't want that. It's like, dude, we got to get over that social construct, because it's artificially put there by the very manufacturers of those chemical products and or the drugs that they use to treat the inflammation and pain associated with those chemical products. So they win going in and going out. And we're subject to this propaganda campaign that we actually make fun of people who want to eat cleaner food. You see how that social construct works? We are being propagandized to believe people that want to be healthy are somehow kind of crazy. Even in this MAHA movement, those of us who have stood in integrity for a long time to try and clean things up. And I still applaud Bobby Kennedy, Secretary Kennedy, for trying to clean up the food. These kinds of things are good. But if we're waiting for the government to sanction our, better behavior about putting clean things in our body, we'll be wrecked with cancer long before they actually come around and acknowledge all the things that I've been talking about for 30, 31 years, 25, 26 years on the air.
And I think that one of the bigger issues that we have is thinking that we're going to be able to save everybody, right? And it's not about, it's about expanding our circle. It's about finding the people that want to change and the people that want to be better, Robert. It's about bringing those who have an open mind and an open heart and are interested in exchanging energy and are interested in learning about what we've learned along our walks. And, I tell Dr. Group all the time, I go, it reminds me of like the Olympics, right? You got all these little intertwined circles in the logo. And that's all we're going to have is just where our circles can connect. You could show people the way. And, I can't tell you how many times I've had people tell me that they're going in for a biopsy. And I'm like, don't do the biopsy. I go, you're going to literally cut something. Your body has enveloped and wrapped something that you do not want spreading through your body. And they're like, oh, well, I just want to go find out what it is. So I'm just going to have them go cut it open. And they're like, oh, yeah, you know what? I'm going in for my mammogram again. And I'm like, you're putting 50 to 70 to 100 pounds of pressure on one of the most sensitive areas of your body. And you're literally rupturing a possible tumor inside there when there's things like thermography. And then they continue to go ahead anyways. So I think in the closing 60 seconds, maybe we got 2 minutes left, I really want to stress to the listeners, when you start thinking about survival, right? Your survival mechanism. If you're out in the jungle, you're in the middle of Brazil, deep in the forest, would you rather have your Harvard doctor with a prescription pad, or would you rather have a functional medicine or a Chinese doctor who knows about plants and herbs and can help you survive? Because when you take away a doctor's ability to inject your child with a vaccine and you take away their ability to write a prescription on that RX pad, what are they really doing for you? If they're not educating you on your lifestyle and your diet and encouraging exercise, I think that's the drug dealer. That's the drug dealer mentality.
Yeah. I know, if you're not teaching people how to heal, how to live, how to eat, how to detoxify, you're not a doctor. I don't care if you have a medical degree. Well, it's evidence of a medical degree that you don't use the God-given sense you were given. that you're so intelligent that you can't see the proverbial forest through the trees, right? And then you're poisoning people for profit. That's a dead end street. I recognize the ability of an allopathic physician to bring you back from the dead if you're riddled with bullets or if you've been hit by a bus. But if you use those same concepts of warfare medicine in what we're talking about, all you're going to do is create more disease. And you may profit from it, but that's not going to profit your soul. That spiritual essence where we are loving and nurturing and healing as opposed to corrupting through chemistry, synthetic poisons, whether it be injected or in pill form. And this is something that we have abandoned in the West, in our world, in America for a long time. And we've exalted these doctors, these deities above all others, including in the churches and synagogues where people worship and they go, oh the doctors, thank the doctors. Like, they are poisoning you for profit. They're the third, second, or first leading cause of death. Stop it. Now, I'm not indicting every individual doctor, but recognize that system corrupts their thinking if they survive medical school. And what we've got to do is be willing to accept them into the fold. Once they repent and come back to the love of God and begin to teach again, first they have to learn it, that we are dealing with deficiency diseases. Cancer, as Dr. Judy Mikovits says, is not a random act of God or not a genetic defect. It's a deficiency disease on top of toxicological burdens, often contributed to by the very doctors who profit from treatment for those things they create.
Yeah. And it's, again, putting people way below profits. And until we start shifting that narrative and we start looking at eating organically grown whole fruits, vegetables, cutting out processed foods and cutting out the sugar. And, I'm not 100% sure that you can even, well, I know you'd be able to talk on it. We're not going to do it today, but I want to bring you back on because I want to dive deeper into how sugar and alcohol is feeding the yeast inside of our body and why we have so much fatty liver happening in this country. And again, please, 15 seconds, share your website, share your show for our listeners. And guys, please subscribe. Go to his Substack. Robert Scott Bell is a very true friend.
Yeah. And come on over to robertscottbell.com. We're live 5 days a week, 3:00 Eastern time. You can catch it live or later on Rumble or on my website. We're banned on YouTube, obviously, and LinkedIn and Spotify, but everywhere else you can pick it up. And I'm just here to bring the power to heal back where it belongs with each and every one of you. God bless you. And God bless you, Mike, Lindell, for having this as well. And Mike, you with the Maha show we have here. This is amazing what you're doing and bringing this power to heal back where it belongs. So thank you for all that you're doing.
I appreciate that, but it's just, people deserve to hear the truth. People need to know that there's another option because I promise them that prescription pad and that pill, it's only a Band-Aid. We've got to get to the root cause of disease in this country. Robert Scott Bell, thank you so much for being one of the best parts of Maha with Mike, which is our guest, and being a fearless leader and an advocate. More importantly, a health freedom enthusiast and a fellow lover of Echo Hydrogen Water. Thank you guys so much. We'll see you next week. God bless.